This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masfar. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all of a couple of things. The first thing I want to remind you all to do is subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. You can do that on whatever application or website you are listening to this on, Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts. Just find our channel and subscribe to it. You want to subscribe to the podcast for a couple of reasons. You want to do so you get those alerts and those notifications, and you know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast here at the GSMC Sports Podcast team. Again, you can subscribe to the podcast on whatever application or website you were listening to this on whatever device. You might be listening to this on your phone, your laptop, your watch even, potentially. You want to subscribe to the podcast again so you get those alerts and those notifications, and you know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast or any of our other podcasts on the network, and you can get those alerts and notifications. It can be one of the first people to listen to a new episode when we release it. So please do not forget to subscribe to the podcast. Also, if you could leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general on that same podcasting app or website, if you are enjoying the content and discussion points we are talking about on the show. And if you're just enjoying the show in general, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general on that same device and podcasting app or website you are listening to this on. Again, it would just give us a big boost of confidence to let us know that you guys are enjoying the discussion points, the flow of the show, the sound mixing, whatever it may be. It would let us know that you guys are enjoying the content we are giving to you guys on this show. So again, please leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general if you are enjoying the show. And finally, don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Over on social media, we can talk about, tonight's Thursday night game between the Rams and Patriots, which I'll obviously get to at the end of the episode. Maybe when James Harden finally gets, traded, you can hear an immediate reaction or an immediate tweet reaction, things like that. So if you can just follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or whichever one you use primarily, that would be awesome. And again, over on social media, we can interact about sports, we can talk about the show, we can really speculate on trade rumors, whatever you guys want to talk about over on social media, we can do that. And again, we'd love to interact with you guys just more in general. So again, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review / a positive review, and also follow us on those 3 social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We would appreciate all that. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during these extremely trying times in the world today. It's the Christmas season. We're in the middle of December up in this point, and very, very soon we have the NBA season starting up in about 12 days as opening night. The NFL is going through probably the most important month of the season for all of these playoff contending teams. We're going to be looking at the playoff races all around the NFL, and just a lot of big games and a lot of big sports going on right now. Of course, the college football playoff is just around the corner in bowl game season, and of course, college basketball is also completely in full-fledged swing as well. Crazy college basketball season so far. Teams like Duke not really performing to their standards. So it's going to be a crazy year of sports, as it's already been a crazy year in general, and I'm really excited and really happy that I get to talk to all of you guys about these things. We have a fantastic show for you all today. I said at the very end of the episode, I'm going to be giving you my updated look at who are the top 10 teams in the National Football League right now. I like to do this every other few weeks or so, or maybe even once a week. I mean, the NFL is obviously changing every single day, and this year more than any others, I've had a really hard time trying to find a consistent top 10 teams. I really like my list this week of the top 10 NFL teams. We'll get into that at the end of the episode, as well as the Patriots-Rams game. Who do I have winning and why? I think it's a huge game for the New England Patriots, also a huge game for the Los Angeles Rams. Patriots trying to keep their season alive. If the Patriots pretty much lose any other game, they're eliminated pretty much essentially from playoff contention. Not a lot of teams, specifically in the AFC, are going to be able to make it with a 9-win season. And for the Rams, they're in the middle of a divisional playoff race with the Rams and Cardinals and Seahawks, of course. So a huge game tonight, not to mention it's Goff versus the Belichick defense again, McVay versus Belichick. It's just a great game. So we'll get into all those NFL things at the end of the episode. And I also want to give you an updated look at who I believe will be finishing where in both the Eastern and Western Conference in the NBA. Again, training camps have started. 2 days from now, we will have some preseason. Again, I like to do this every few weeks or so as well. I haven't done one of these since John Wall and the Russell Westbrook trade happened, so I will be giving you an updated prediction list of where I have at each team for the Eastern and Western Conference, who do I have making the playoffs and why, first 8 teams in both the East and West. We'll get into that later on the episode, but we're going to start off with what I ended last episode with, because we have an update on James Harden and his current situation with the Houston Rockets. So at the end of my last episode, I was talking about the news and how Philadelphia became one of the teams that James Harden could potentially want to go play for. And I said that Philadelphia definitely needs James Harden more than a team like Brooklyn needs James Harden. But I thought that eventually James Harden would find his way to Brooklyn. But today there was some more news coming from Adrian Wojnarowski and Shams saying that there's 2 more teams that have been added to James Harden's list. Now, it did come out my last episode that when Philadelphia was, quote unquote, added to the list, that there were other contenders on the list, but the name had not been revealed. I think these are the other 2 teams that James Harden was highly considering going to. And what one of those things are the Milwaukee Bucks and the Miami Heat. Now, I mentioned Miami a little bit at the end of last episode. I'll talk about them more here because actually they have become the betting odds favorite to land James Harden. So that's what this segment's going to be primarily dedicated to, is what would the Miami Heat look like with James Harden. Again, they're the betting favorites now for him, and on Twitter, things are certainly starting to stack up. Jimmy Butler liking some Instagram posts in relationship to James Harden, things like that, and James Harden playing some songs on Instagram Live that are not on Instagram Live as an Instagram story that reference the city of Miami and yada yada this. So it's not looking, I don't want to say it's looking likely or a definite by any means. There hasn't been a report that has said that it's happening or anything like that. But there have been rumors that James Harden, or I should actually say the Rockets and the Heat have engaged in some trade conversations. I'm sure, the Rockets have engaged with other teams as well. So that's what this segment's primarily going to be dedicated to, is what will James Harden look like on the Miami Heat? Now, on the Milwaukee Bucks front, they're one of those teams that has also been mentioned. I don't see a way that gets done. The Bucks don't have really any young assets. Dante DiVincenzo appears to be that guy, and he's nothing more than a bench player in my opinion. And they obviously traded their entire future in first-round picks for Drew Holiday. So I don't think there's a realistic trade package where Harden gets his way to Milwaukee. Also, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Giannis and Harden to want to team up. They had beef in the past. If you remember, I think it was around the MVP discussion time. When Giannis won his first MVP, not this most recent year, but I think it was the year before, where Harden said that he deserved to win it because Giannis is just big and tall and doesn't really know how to play basketball, while Harden has to learn to dribble and shoot and penetrate the defense and yada yada this. And there was a big debate and, things like that. So it didn't make a lot of sense from a chemistry standpoint. I don't think Giannis and Harden's game really worked together in the first place anyway. And on top of all that, I've looked at the Milwaukee Bucks roster up and down, their salary cap, things like that. And I don't see a realistic way where James Harden could find his way to Milwaukee, or Milwaukee to even present a reasonable offer for James Harden, who again is an MVP and averages about 35 a game the last 3 years and things like that. So let's get into it. Why does this make sense for the Miami Heat? So at the end of my last episode, I said I thought Miami. If you've listened to the show, you've known for a long time. I've always thought that the Miami Heat were going to make a move after losing to the Lakers in the finals. Pat Riley smells blood. He knows that the Lakers are good, but they're not Golden State level Golden State Warrior level super team just yet. Now, they have had an incredible offseason, adding Montrezl Harrell, Dennis Schroeder, looking like they also might be considering having Trevor Ariza. They added Marc Gasol. They also might be bringing Pau Gasol out of retirement. So they're a deep team, and they're certainly the favorites. But Pat Riley wants to win a championship, and he wants to retire. And he's wanted to win a championship again ever since LeBron James left. And he has said multiple times that after this sort of championship, he's going to go retire in Calabasas and things like that. He got close this year, went to Game 6 of the NBA Finals. That Heat team overperformed. He wants to get over the hump. And the only major move that the Miami Heat sort of made this offseason was adding a guy like Avery Bradley, who I like a lot. And they bring in Mo Harkless and ship out Jay Crowder, which I think those guys are kind of even-level players. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think Mo Harkless is a little bit taller, a little bit longer, maybe even a better three-point shooter. Jay seems to be a lot more physical, though, so it's a little give and take here. I really like the Avery Bradley signing for Miami to go along with Tyler Hero and things like that. But then I also thought they could be in consideration for trading like a guy like Victor Oladipo. Again, I still think it's a possibility if they don't land Harden that Oladipo is the guy they trade for. I know they're keeping an eye on Bradley Beal as well, and it's sort of unclear what's his future looking like in Washington. I think he's definitely going to play in Washington this year and give him and Russell Westbrook sort of a shot, and then he'll revisit his future next year. And they obviously have their eyes on Giannis Antetokounmpo as well. But I think if Bradley Beal... it's looking like he's going to be in Washington for the long term. Unless this year goes disastrous, he's going to be here this year. So if Pat Riley is truly all in on winning now, James Harden seems like the guy to go get. He clearly wants out of Houston. His value is not as high as people, I don't think as high as people think. James Harden is in his 30s. I believe he's 31 years old, and while he is an elite scorer, he has this narrative that he's got playoff woes, and he doesn't have the greatest defense in the world, and he hasn't necessarily won anything from a team standpoint. And again, his playing style could turn a lot of teams off, turn a lot of teammates off. So I don't think you're going to get a package that we saw, while I think he's better than Paul George 100%. You remember that Paul George package that, Oklahoma City got with the 5 first-round picks, or even what, the 3 first-round picks they got for Jrue Holiday from Milwaukee and things like that. I don't even know if James Harden's going to command that. But what I do think the Houston Rockets are deserved, and what I think that is a not an unfair price for James Harden, is a young cornerstone. I think them asking for a guy who could potentially be the face of the franchise in the future, or a young player who has the potential to turn into a star or superstar, is fair considering they're trading a guy who does average between 30 and 39 points a game any given year, has averaged at least 25 points a game since the year 2012, has clearly been the NBA's best all-around scorer the past couple of years, and I love Kevin Durant, love LeBron James, Steph Curry, they all do it. Nobody puts up the statistical numbers that James Harden does, and he's a former MVP with the potential to win MVP again. You could have given James Harden the MVP last year for his stats, and I'm sure no matter what team he plays for this year, you could give him the MVP again just off pure statistical numbers, and he's going to lead the league in scoring again. And while he is over the age of 30, I think his prime is still very much ahead of him. I think he's at least in his prime right now. I would consider his prime to continue through his current contract, which has 2 more years left. But as athletes and sort of sports keep on evolving, guys are playing later and later and still being effective and dominant. And James Harden has a game that will age well. He's primarily a shooter. He's not a guy like the Miami Heat are familiar with, Dwayne Wade, who kept attacking the basket and getting hurt with his knees and things like that. He isn't even as physical as LeBron. He's more of a shooter. So guys like him, Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, their games will actually age well, and they won't, you won't see a huge dramatic fall off that you saw with Derrick Rose after his injury, or even Dwayne Wade, if you want to argue, towards the end of his career due to his physicality. I'm not saying that he's going to be LeBron James and, continue to average these types of numbers going into his late 30s, maybe even early 40s like LeBron probably will, but I still think James Harden is a very capable player, not just for his next 2 years, but through 33, 34, 35, 36, things like that. So if Pat Riley really is about winning now, and I think he is, James Harden seems like the number one guy right now that is on the block that you could go after. Now, what would a trade package look like for Miami? Now, there's going to be a couple of teams throwing in offers for James Harden. Again, the list is way smaller than some of these teams, like Anthony Davis had and things like that. I think Milwaukee's out of it, like I mentioned before. I don't think Milwaukee has a realistic trade package. I honestly think at this point that Brooklyn's out as well. It doesn't seem like they're too engaged or that they want James Harden that badly. I think they're totally content, and Steve Nash is as well, with just KD, Kyrie, Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, DeAndre Jordan. The roster that they have currently constructed, I think they believe can win a championship now. They've obviously already opened up training camp and trying to get some, chemistry going. And again, even a trade package that Brooklyn would have to offer, since they don't have this young guy that could turn into a superstar or something like that, would have to send, Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert and probably Jared Allen as well, and picks. So do they want to do that? Not necessarily when they're already in a position to succeed. Now, you can certainly argue for the Miami Heat as well, that they don't need to make this move. And I would agree with you. The Miami Heat do not need to make this move for James Harden and win it to get to a championship. But to win a championship, I think they might. Now, again, I've said over and over again, I think Philadelphia is the team that needs James Harden the most. I don't think Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are ever going to work. And if I were the Philadelphia 76ers, I would 100% incorporate a guy like Ben Simmons into the trade discussion for one of those teams, for a James Harden package. Daryl Morey seems unreliant to do that, and another thing that could, disrupt the potential Harden to Philadelphia trade is the fact that Daryl Morey stepped down from the Houston Rockets organization and sort of left them when they were in the middle of cap hell. The cap hell that Daryl Morey was really the cause for. He's the one who, got James Harden and paid him all the money, adapted to James Harden's playing style, traded for Westbrook, got rid of Chris Paul. The Houston Rockets are in this all sort of mess due to a large part of what Daryl Morey decided to do with the roster and the culture. And then he just up and left. Remember, Daryl Morey was never fired from the Houston Rockets general manager position. He stepped down and obviously runs the basketball operations side for Philadelphia now. So, of course, him and Harden are always going to be linked together. But I wouldn't be surprised that the owner of Houston, who is a very public owner, sort of Jerry Jones-like, very involved with his team, does interviews, if he has told the new GM of the Houston Rockets that you can't trade James Harden to the Philadelphia 76ers, no matter what the offer is, because, again, he doesn't want to give Daryl Morey necessarily what he wants. So that leaves the Miami Heat. And, again, they have a player that they can incorporate who I believe has the potential to be a star, even superstar, Tyler Hero. Now, there's been a debate among Heat fans and Heat Twitter and Heat Reddit on is Tyler Hero worth giving up for, James Harden. And you might be wondering, well, Alex, why aren't you mentioning a guy like Bam Adebayo in a trade package? It has been made very clear by Pat Riley and the organization, Eric Spoelstra, even Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo is not going anywhere. He just signed a 5-year max contract extension with the team, and while he was not the best player on the Miami Heat last season, he was a damn close second to Jimmy Butler, and I could even argue he was the most important player on that Miami Heat team. Udonis Haslem, who's been that veteran for Miami for years and years and sort of is the culture setter there, besides Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, came out and said that Bam is the next culture setter. He's the Alonzo Mourning that the Heat had in the 90s. He's the Udonis Haslem. He's the Wade. And maybe he doesn't have the talent as some of those guys and won't put up the numbers as Dwayne Wade and things like that or had the awards and accolades. But Bam Adebayo is the heart and soul of the Miami Heat. He's not going anywhere. I think Pat Riley would rather have Bam Adebayo on his team than James Harden. I really do believe that. So I don't think he's going anywhere. And of course, Butler's not going anywhere either. So what does that leave for Tyler Hero? Now, Tyler Hero is a guy who averaged 14 points his rookie year, shot extremely well from the field, and obviously had one of the best playoff runs a rookie has had in NBA history. Forget Heat history, NBA history, which was obviously, the number one moment of that was his 37-point performance in an Eastern Conference Finals series against a really good team, the Boston Celtics, that had two really good defenders guarding him, Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, and the series was 2-1 at the time. So this wasn't, them up 3-0 and Hero just kind of going off and the Celtics already quit. No. That game is what put the Heat up 3-1 and sort of closed out the series officially. So Tyler Hero is a legitimate player in this league. Now, some people consider him overrated and things like that. I think if Tyler Hero got the starting role either in Miami or if he is traded to Houston, he would flourish and could be a 20-plus point per game scorer as soon as this year. You have to keep in mind he's only 20 years old, and you're paying him practically nothing in NBA terms due to his rookie contract. So the Heat have the pieces to trade for James Harden, in my opinion. I think it's up to Pat Riley. Does he want to move off a guy like Tyler Hero? Now, if a trade package were to surround, Hero, Nunn, Olynyk, Iguodala to make the money work, and some future first-round picks, I would do that if I were the Miami Heat. I think if you had a team that was centered around James Harden at the 1, Avery Bradley at the 2, potentially, or off the bench, wherever you want to throw Duncan Robinson in there, then, of course, Bam and Butler, that team is lethal. If you surround James Harden with one of the most elite defensive players in the league, Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, plus Avery Bradley, who I think is a fantastic perimeter defender, you could be looking at the best team James Harden has ever played with. And we know James Harden is going to put up numbers, and I'm not necessarily saying that the Heat would sort of change their style to formulate around James Harden, but it has been reported that James Harden wants to play in a new style of system. He likes the ISO ball, doesn't love it anymore. I think he recognizes that while the ISO ball gets him those statistics, gets him those 35 points, maybe even gets him the MVPs and the scoring titles, it's not what he wants to do long term because it's not translating to winning. But I think if they could combine James Harden's ISO style on top of that Miami Heat grit and defense and keep sort of that ball movement centric system with cutting and things like that already in place, The Miami Heat could be a championship team next year if they get James Harden. I think they're the number one team in the Eastern Conference if they do. If they get Harden, and if you roll out a big three of Butler, Bam, Harden with Duncan Robinson still in the mix, Dragic off the bench, Avery Bradley for the 3-and-D, you're looking at probably the best team in the Eastern Conference, and I would put them above Brooklyn, and I think they'd push the Lakers at least to 6 again, if not 7, if not win, depending on the fit between those three guys. Again, Bam, Butler, and James Harden. Now, I'm acting and talking all this as if it's a done deal. It is not. And again, if I had to bet money on where James Harden would play, I can't give you a direct answer right now. I really thought it was going to be Brooklyn. Those talks are reportedly dead. Again, I really want to say Philadelphia, but Morey seems to be inclined on not giving, separating Embiid and Simmons, and I don't think you can land James Harden if you don't give up one of those two, considering Philadelphia doesn't have a young potential superstar like the Heat do in Tyler Hero. And that leaves the Miami Heat, unless there's a dark horse team, unless Brooklyn wants to come to the table and sort of dismantle their roster, and unless Philadelphia wants to move Ben Simmons to Houston, there's a real chance that James Harden plays for the Miami Heat next year, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. Vegas thinks that as well. They are now the overwhelming favorite to land James Harden at just plus 250 for Game 1. And again, as the season goes on, as training camp wears on, as Houston, who has a new coach, is trying to establish a new culture, they're going to want to move Harden sooner rather than later. And of course, Houston has come out and said, like every other organization does when they do this, that they're willing to go deep into the season and trade him later and yada yada this. They want to move him as soon as possible. They don't want to go into the season with this James Harden crap on their hand. There have been teams that have sort of made it uncomfortable and prolonged the decision. If you remember, I think Minnesota held on for Jimmy Butler for a little bit too long than he wanted to, and it caused rift with the fans, and I'm pretty sure he got booed during a home game. You don't want that type of stuff formulating around your basketball team. I expect Harden to be moved sooner rather than later, and if I had to pick a team right now he's going to get moved to, just because of all the rumors and everything that's making sense, it's looking more likely that James Harden is a Miami Heat player this season. And again, I love Tyler Hero, and I know a lot of Heat fans love him more than I do. But at the end of the day, James Harden is a guy who is averaging 25 points a game for the last, 8 years, and is averaging 30-plus the last 4 seasons. You have to make that move if you're Pat Riley, if it's only costing you Tyler Hero and a couple of other guys. And I'd even consider it if you had to throw in Duncan Robinson in there as well. The only guy that's untouchable in the Miami Heat roster right now, besides obviously Jimmy Butler, is Bam Adebayo, in my opinion. So again, if the Miami Heat do end up landing James Harden, I immediately put them as the best team in the Eastern Conference, maybe even the best team in the entire league. Going to be interesting to see how the James Harden rumors play out, and don't be surprised. Again, I said all this about the Miami Heat, still would not be totally shocked if Brooklyn finally came to the table and bit the bullet and gave up, half their roster and half their picks for him, or if Philadelphia, Daryl Morey finally bites the bullet and decides to give up either Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid. I wouldn't be surprised if he's moved to either one of those two teams either. But I have to say right now, I'm going to have to agree with Vegas on this one. It's looking as the hours go by that James Harden has a real shot at being a Miami Heat next season, which is going to be really, really interesting to see play out. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. I want to take a short break. On the other side of this short break, I want to give you my updated Eastern Conference standings. Where do I have each Eastern Conference team going? I'm going to give you 1 through 8. I'm not going to get to every Eastern Conference team, but I'm going to give you the 8 teams that I think will make the playoffs. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking about everything James Harden. Again, if I had to say right now at this exact time of recording where James Harden is going to play next season, I think I'd have to give it to the Miami Heat. Right now, all of those signs are pointing towards a deal potentially getting done there. I think Brooklyn has gone silent with Houston, and they are not interested anymore, and I don't see a way Milwaukee can get it done, and it looks like Daryl Morey, at least right now, is holding firm on the fact that he's not going to move off of Ben Simmons, and who knows, maybe the owner of Houston does not want Harden to go play for Philly and Morey, considering he kind of just left the organization up and dry. At this point, Miami seems right now the most logical sense for both teams. And again, Harden wants to play with a contender. Pat Riley's always in win now mode. And again, I don't think it would cost you more than Tyler Hero, maybe Duncan Robinson, and some cap filling and some picks, obviously, as well. But if James Harden is on the Miami Heat starting next season, that team is a dangerous team, not just now, but for the future as well, due to the fact that Jimmy Butler and also James Harden are only in their early 30s. And again, with the NBA going the way it is, guys are playing later, they're playing longer, and they're staying in their prime longer as well. On top of that, add the young talent of Bam Adebayo, who is on pace to potentially become the best defensive player in the league one day. And of course, we know Miami always finds a way to improve, a competitive squad around them. So dangerous stuff in Miami if James Harden's there. I want to continue my conversation with the NBA. I like to do this every few weeks. Give you my updated before the season starts predictions for both the Eastern and Western Conference. We'll do the Eastern Conference in this segment, the Western Conference in the next segment. And again, at the end of the episode, I'll be giving you at least a game preview of Rams, Patriots, and if we have time, my top 10 NFL teams, but I might have to hold off on that until next episode. We'll see how it plays out. But again, let's just get right into it here. These are my updated predictions for the Eastern Conference. Again, we're about, 12 days now away from the start of the NBA season. Traditionally, I would give you 1 through 8, and I know I said that in my last segment, but then I remembered that actually the NBA is continuing that playoff format where I believe the 8th seed and the 9th seed have a play-in game to see who actually gets that final playoff spot. I believe that's how it works. I think it's 8, 9. It might go to 10, but I'm just going to give you 1 through 9 in each conference, and we'll get into it real quick right now. So starting off in the East, the first, I'll give you the 9th overall. Actually, you know what? I'll go from top to bottom. I'll start with number 1 because I think it gets more interesting actually towards the bottom than at the top in both of these conferences. So the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference next year, I believe, will be the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, I don't think they are the best team in the East. In fact, at this point in time, even pre-Harden trade, I think they're number 3. I still think they're behind Miami and Brooklyn, even if Miami doesn't make any more moves. And you could argue Boston's ahead of them as well, depending on how Tristan Thompson sort of works out, and Jeff Teague as well, and if Tatum takes another leap and Kemba's health. But I think Milwaukee's built for the regular season. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they have the best overall record. Again, they only got rid of, player-wise, Eric Bledsoe really is a major contributor, and they replaced him with Drew Holiday, so their record in theory should be better. Again, I don't agree with the Drew Holiday trade. I thought they gave up way too much to get a guy of his caliber, but it is going to improve their team, and Drew Holiday's game 100% fits with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and his defense is going to be there as well, so I expect Milwaukee to win more games than they did last year, and if that's the case, I really do believe they'll have the overall best record, potentially in the entire NBA, but at least in the Eastern Conference. Again, now come playoff time, I don't think they're the best team. Again, I would put Miami and Brooklyn ahead of them, but for the regular season purposes, I do think they're going to have the best overall record, and I think Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to have another MVP-type season. Will he win it? I'm not so sure about that, but I do think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be the number 1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference, just based off record-wise. I think they'll get upwards of 65-plus games, maybe even push 70 at this point. So number 1, Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Mike Budenholzer, and of course the new addition, Drew Holiday. They're really weak on the bench part, but again, depth isn't really rewarded in the regular season. It's more rewarded in the playoffs. So again, Milwaukee, number 1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference. Coming in at number 2, I think the Miami Heat, no matter where they go, I think they're going to be a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. I am making this specific list under the assumption that James Harden's going to be a Miami Heat player. So if James Harden isn't on the Miami Heat, I think they will be the 3 seed and Brooklyn will be number 2. But right now I have Miami 2, Brooklyn 3, assuming James Harden does end up being a Miami Heat. Again, when you add James Harden potentially to this team, and I know I'm talking as if this deal is done, it is 100% not done. And any moment right now we could get a tweet from Woj or Sam saying he's going to Philly or Brooklyn or maybe a surprise team. But right now, signs are sort of pointing, towards him being in Miami, so I'm operating under that assumption right now, and I think if they do, if you add James Harden to a lineup that'll consist of Jimmy Butler, Avery Bradley, probably Mo Harkless as well, and Bam Adebayo, 4 elite defenders in this league, at least 3 of those guys. Butler, Avery Bradley, and Bam Adebayo are elite defenders in this league, and I think Mo Harkless is a slept-on defender. He's long, vertical, physical, can shoot the 3 as well. And then, of course, you have Dragic and Robinson coming off the bench potentially. That team is scary. And again, if you want to argue that James Harden's biggest weakness is his defense, surround him with 3 or 4 elite defenders, and all of a sudden defense isn't an issue anymore. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what James Harden does next year. Specifically, if he is a Miami Heat player, it'll be a lot of fun to watch. Miami, number 2 in my opinion. Not necessarily, I don't think they're going to come out of the East. I think they will come out of the East if they get Harden. But either way, even if they don't get James Harden, I think they would fall to 3, and that would bring me to Brooklyn. So I think Brooklyn, if Miami does get Harden, will be the 3rd best team record-wise in the Eastern Conference for the regular season, and if they don't get James Harden, I think Brooklyn will move into 2. If they do get James Harden, by the way, I think they'd be the number 1 seed, but I don't think they're going to get James Harden. So number 3, as of right now, I believe will be the Brooklyn Nets. Now, KD and Kyrie, there's been some footage leaked about them. KD looks pretty good, looking pretty healthy. I just saw a video of him sort of giving the business to Joe Harris one-on-one. It was fun to see. I think Brooklyn overall is going to be a top 3 seed. I wouldn't be surprised if KD and Kyrie don't play all 82 games this year. Specifically, Kyrie, he gets hurt every year. He'll miss a certain amount of weeks. KD could miss it just because of, Achilles risk and rest and things like that. And again, they have a pretty good team without those guys. Dinwiddie and DeAndre Jordan and Karis LeVert can win you a couple games. We saw that. They essentially got to the playoffs with that last year, considering Kyrie pretty much missed the entire second half of the season and then opted out of the playoffs. So at the end of the day, I think Brooklyn's going to be a top 3 seed. I think they'll win a ton of games, at least 50. Can they push 60? Potentially. Again, if Kyrie and KD would play every single game every year, you could argue they could be all the way number 1 in the entire NBA, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think Kyrie will only play 60-something games, and KD will probably play about the same, maybe even 70. I don't expect either of those 2 guys to play 75-plus games this year, like the LeBrons and the Giannis's and the Butlers do. But at the end of the day, they're still going to be an absolutely incredible team, and Brooklyn is looking towards the playoffs. That's when we're going to see how good this Brooklyn Nets team really is. That's when KD and Kyrie will be healthy and not taking days off. So I think Brooklyn is built more for the playoffs than the regular season, hence why I don't think they'll be the number 1 or maybe even number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference regular season record-wise. I have them coming in number 3, Brooklyn Nets in the Eastern Conference. Number 4, I have the Boston Celtics. I don't think they got as better as people think. I like the Tristan Thompson signing. I don't think he's necessarily a game changer. And Jeff Teague is certainly an upgrade over Brad Wanamaker, but that bench is still deadly thin. They lost Gordon Hayward, and yes, they got the trade exception. Not sure if Danny Ainge is going to do anything with it. And Kemba Walker looks like he's going to miss at least the first month of the season. So I don't think they're going to be able to reach top 3 seed record-wise. Don't be surprised if Boston has a rough start to the season, but finishes strong. At the end of the day, though, I still think they're a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. I put them at number 4. But there will be teams really, really close behind them in that 4 through even 6 or 7 range. Don't be surprised if some of these other teams creep up on Boston. But I think at the end of the day, Jason Tatum is too good to let that team fall past the 4 seed. I think once Kemba gets back healthy, his knee will feel a little bit better, and he'll have probably a better regular season than he did playoffs last year. Jaylen Brown's only going to get better, and yes, Tristan Thompson's an upgrade over Daniel Tice. I still don't love the Boston's bench. I think Jeff Teague's a good player, not great, and I think also Jeff Teague's going to be starting at the beginning of the year unless they go with Smart. So it's going to be interesting to see how Boston plays out. Didn't do a ton of roster overhaul. I really thought they should have found a way to try to get Miles Turner from Indiana. That didn't end up happening, and of course Hayward left for a trade exception. How will it play out? We'll see. Maybe they do end up making a move, but at the end of the day, I still think Boston is the 4th best team in the Eastern Conference. Not only do I think they're the 4th best team record-wise, I think that's probably where they are at just overall in the grand scheme of the Eastern Conference as well. So number 4, I have the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference. Coming in at number 5, we have the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, of course, everything changes for them if they get James Harden. I'd move them probably into top 3 range, maybe 4. But at the end of the day, if nothing else has changed with the Philadelphia 76ers, I think they'll be a 5 seed. However, I think they'll be a better 5 seed than they were last year. I like the roster overhaul that they did. I think Seth Curry was a great addition. I thought some of their other shooters were a good addition as well. I think Doc Rivers is clearly an upgraded head coach over Brett Brown. The only concern I have with Philadelphia has been my concern with them the last 4 or 5 years. Can Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons coexist? It appears that both of them play their best basketball when they're each other's off the court. Now, maybe this everything, changes with Doc Rivers, and maybe it was the scene, and potentially there is a chance that, there's a chance that maybe they improve because of Doc Rivers, and at the end of the day, maybe it was the offensive system that Brett Brown was running and not necessarily, what, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid do from a game perspective. But at the end of the day, Ben Simmons still can't shoot, and, Joel Embiid still appears to be a paint-dominant sort of guy, so I'm going to have them at the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. I don't think there'll be, any more from there. At the end of the day, I still think Philadelphia is the 5th best team in the Eastern Conference. So coming at number 5, Philadelphia 76ers, Doc Rivers, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons. Again, things change if Harden's there, but I still think he's going to end up as a Miami Heat player right now. Coming at number 6, I have the Toronto Raptors. I don't think they did anything to really improve their roster this year. All they've done is lost Serge Ibaka. But at the end of the day, they're still a hard, gritty defensive team with a great coach in Nick Nurse. So they'll drop in the rankings, but they'll still be a tough out no matter what. Toronto number 6, not much more you can say. I just don't think they have the offensive firepower of Philly, Boston, Brooklyn, Miami, and Milwaukee. They can compete defensively with those teams, but I don't think they can offensively. I think Pascal Siakam got exposed a little bit at the end of the day when it comes to there. Number 7, I have the Atlanta Hawks. They are the most improved team in the offseason besides maybe the Lakers. I think no team, obviously Brooklyn as well because they got their guys back that they were already on the roster. I love all the signings that Atlanta did. Trae Young's going to take another leap this year. Don't be surprised if Trae Young's in the MVP conversation as well as the NBA's leading scorer conversation. Number 7, Atlanta Hawks. I don't think they'll be the 8th seed. I don't think they'll miss the playoffs. This Atlanta team is good. They will be getting better as the year progresses. They have a ton of young players that will improve. I like their coach. I like their system. I love Trae Young, obviously, as well. And adding Danilo Gallinari was a big piece. Clint Capella gets a second year in this offensive system, pick and roll with Trae Young. Big things happening in Atlanta. They have a really, really bright future, and I think they come in at number 7, Atlanta Hawks in the Eastern Conference. Now let's get to 8 and 9, because these are the two teams that are going to be obviously playing each other for that last final playoff spot. I believe it's going to come down to Charlotte and Washington. I think Indiana is going to take a big step back next year. Don't love their head coaching hire at the end of the day, and on top of all that, I don't know what the Victor Oladipo situation is going to bring, and I don't see a way they really improve their roster. I think they're taking a big step back. So again, I don't even think Indiana is a top 9 seed in the Eastern Conference. I think I'd probably put them at number 10. If I had to guess right now, I'd put Washington 8 with Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook. I don't think it's going to be a perfect partnership, and I don't even think it's going to be as good as some people believe it will be. But I think in the weaker Eastern Conference, specifically at the bottom, there's no chance that there's not a way that Washington misses the playoffs. I don't think the Eastern Conference is good enough for them to miss the playoffs. So I think they'll come in at number 8. Will they make the playoffs over Charlotte? Who knows? We'll have to see the play-in game. But Charlotte also made a lot of nice moves. I think Gordon Hayward's an overpay, but you're the Charlotte Hornets. You're going to have to overpay for guys like that to come to your team. And I really like LaMelo Ball, and I think he'll be winning Rookie of the Year. So when you combine all of those things in a weaker Eastern Conference, I think it'll come down to Charlotte or Washington at the end of the day for those last 2 playoff spots in the Eastern Conference. It's going to be a lot of fun to see. So to recap, I have Milwaukee 1, Miami 2, assuming they get James Harden, Brooklyn 3, Boston 4, Philly 5, Toronto 6, Atlanta Hawks 7, Washington Wizards 8, and I think they'll be that final playoff team, and Charlotte making it to the play-in game but just falling short. Those are my Eastern Conference predictions at this point. I'm assuming I'll be doing one more of these before the NBA season actually starts in 12 days, probably some point next week or the week after a James Harden trade officially happens or if any other moves happen as well. So you'll probably get this one more time, but those are my updated Eastern Conference predictions heading into next NBA season, which is, again, about 12 days away. All right, we're going to take another short break. On the other side of this break, I want to give you same thing, but with the Western Conference. Where do I have all of these teams filing out? Will New Orleans make the playoffs? Do some of these teams, cut back? Where do I put Houston? We'll get into all of that good stuff, the NBA Western Conference predictions, right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Mesford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking everything NBA Eastern Conference, and those are my predictions for the Eastern Conference standings at the end of this upcoming year. I want to do the same thing now for the Western Conference. Again, I like to do this every few weeks or so, leading up to the NBA season. Again, this won't obviously not continue after the NBA season starts, but I'll probably do this one more time after the James Harden thing sort of cools down, and if there's any other new moves that sort of come into place here in the NBA season, I will also give you an updated predictions on the standings after that. But for now, I want to give you my Western Conference predictions as I just gave you my Eastern Conference ones last segment. So let's get right into it here. I'm going to go from top to bottom. I'm going to give you 1 through 9, considering the play-in round and everything like that. I think you'll be interested in my takes here for the Western Conference, so let's get right into it. So it's pretty obvious who I think I have as the number 1 overall seed, either in the NBA, but definitely at least in the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, they're the defending NBA champions after beating the Miami Heat in 6 games. At the end of last year. On top of all that, I would have to say that they probably had the best overall offseason, adding, going from, their biggest concern, I think, was probably their bench depth last year, and now they might have the best bench in the entire NBA with Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell coming off the bench, 2 guys who were who were 6th man of the year candidates last year. And again, you already know what Anthony Davis and LeBron James can do on a night-to-night basis, and those are 2 guys that pretty much play each and every game, so I think for their regular season record, they will definitely be the number 1 overall seed in the Western Conference. On top of all that, I still have them as the favorites to win it all. Again, even if James Harden ends up going to Miami or, unless he goes to Brooklyn, I would still pick the Lakers to win it all. But again, that could change with everything going on with James Harden. But for sure, I think the Lakers, by a considerable margin, are the best overall team right now in the Western Conference. Coming in at number 1, all LA Lakers. I think it's pretty obvious that they're going to be the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, bearing an injury or something crazy like that. Coming in as the number 2 seed, I am going to give it to the LA Clippers. And while they are the number 2 seed in the Western Conference, that doesn't necessarily make me think that they're that close to the LA Lakers. I still think there's a huge gap between those 2 teams. Again, like I've talked about in my previous episodes, everything we were saying about the Clippers last year, their championship caliber head coach, their sustainable front office, their bench depth, and their 2 superstars, everything we were saying about them last year is now what's being said about the LA Lakers this year, and on top of that, the Lakers are the defending champs. So I think there's still a pretty wide gap between the Clippers and the Lakers, but at the end of the day, they still have Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and I think Tyronn Lue can coach at least a little bit. He's obviously won a championship in that 3-1 comeback with LeBron James, and obviously has made multiple finals appearances on top of that as well. They added Serge Ibaka, which is a nice piece. Can he replace those minutes from Montrezl Harrell? Not necessarily statistically, but I think he's better for the team than Montrezl Harrell was. I need to see some more from Lou Williams, though. He looked like he regressed badly in the bubble last year, so we're going to see with that. And again, I think there are depths and some questions now. But if Serge Ibaka can provide that good leadership and team ability like he did potentially in Toronto and continue those statistics, and maybe he doesn't regress, and maybe even he even has a better year than he did last year, maybe the Clippers can compete with the Lakers. But at this point, while they are the 2nd seed in the Western Conference, I think there's still a gap between them and the LA Lakers, who are obviously number 1. Coming at number 3, I have the Denver Nuggets. Now, in my previous one, I had the Nuggets a little bit lower. That was until I did a little bit more research on Bol Bol, his goal is to be the Rookie of the Year this year. They didn't necessarily upgrade at any position, considering they lost Jeremy Grant. But at the end of the day, there is a real chance that Bol Bol takes those Jeremy Grant minutes and runs with it. And I think he has the potential to be Rookie of the Year. Again, I still think LaMelo Ball is going to win it, considering I think he's going to have a lot of points being scored this year, and he's going to lead that Charlotte team to a potential playoff berth in the Eastern Conference. So I don't want to say Bol Bol is definitely going to win Rookie of the Year, but he could totally be in that conversation. And on top of all that, there is clearly an avenue for him to get in the starting lineup at the 4. His ball handling, his shooting, again, I don't want to make this all about Bol Bol, because again, Jokic and Murray run this team, and Mike Malone's a fantastic coach, and they're always, good in the regular season. I think they were 2nd in the Eastern Conference or Western Conference last year. I expect them to drop a little bit down below to 3rd because of those Jerry and Grant minutes. But again, Bol Bol and Michael Porter Jr. taking big leaps could be the difference between them making a deep playoff run again or not. So I'm going to have to give this one to Denver. I think they will be the 3rd best team in the Western Conference. The Denver Nuggets with Jokic, Mike Malone, Bol Bol, Michael Porter Jr., and of course Jamal Murray as well. I think that team looks really, really good. So I think they're going to come in at number 3 in the Western Conference, the Denver Nuggets. Coming in at number 4 is a team and a guy I've talked a lot about, the Dallas Mavericks. Kristaps Porzingis is the X factor here. I need to see him play at least 70 to 75 games this year, limit the injuries, and show what you did at the end of last season throughout the entire season. He had a slow start to the year last year, finished strong. Need Kristaps Porzingis to continue that for the rest of his career, really, but definitely at least this season. And again, Luka Doncic is my MVP pick this year. I think he's going to average at least 30 points a game this year. Close to a 30-point triple-double would be my guess. That kid is special, and like I've talked about before, he is currently on the path to become the greatest international player to ever play the game. Him and Giannis are going to be competing for that for a long, long time to go up there with guys like Manu Ginobili, Hakeem Olajuwon, things like that. But at the end of the day, Luka Doncic is my MVP pick, and I still think at this point he's underrated. He is that good of a player. I think he's going to be in the MVP conversation every single year for a long, long time, and I think this year is the year that Dallas takes another big leap and finishes top 4 in a really crowded, really tough Western Conference. I'm going to have to give this one to Dallas. I think they are a really good team, and I think Luka Doncic is a special type of player. So he's coming in at number 4. Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban, Frank Ribery, all those guys, and I think they'll be a top 4 seed in the West for sure. But Kristaps Porzingis is the X factor to see if they're one of these teams that can compete with the big dogs like Clippers and Lakers late in the playoffs. So coming in at number 4, the Dallas Mavericks. Coming in at number 5, I have the Golden State Warriors. Now, of course, Klay Thompson will not be playing this year, but at the end of the day, I think Andrew Wiggins is going to have an absolutely monster year. I don't think it's going to be quite as good as maybe what KD did with Golden State, but I think it will be better than what Harrison Barnes did in Golden State. Again, Andrew Wiggins in a bad organization with a not great coach in Tom Thibodeau, and again, just a not great organization in general. Minnesota was putting up 20 a game. Now he's in a better organization, better coach Steve Kerr, an unselfish superstar in Steph Curry who likes to spread the ball around more, and it's sort of, I think there's a point and there's a big role for Andrew Wiggins, and I think he'll have a really, really good season. And don't be surprised if Andrew Wiggins is in the conversation for most improved. And at the end of the day, I really do believe Golden State is going to, be contending again. And again, if they had Klay Thompson, I'd probably put them at 3 or even 2 in the Western Conference. But with no Klay Thompson, I have to drop them down to 5. Still a really, really good team in Golden State, really good organization. And I think Steph Curry is probably the easiest superstar to play with in the entire world. Pretty much the entire sports world. So at the end of the day, I think that's how it's going to play out for the Golden State Warriors. Coming in at number 5, Golden State, Steph Curry, Bob Myers, all of those great guys in the organization in Golden State. Coming in at number 6, I have the Phoenix Suns, another team that I expect to make a huge leap this season. Is Phoenix. They added Chris Paul for a reason. What Chris Paul is going to do for DeAndre Ayton's game is going to be even more impressive than what he does for Devin Booker's game. Chris Paul gets everybody in the right position on offense, runs the offense beautifully, like Monty Williams as the head coach a lot as well, and Chris Paul is going to be hitting a lot of clutch shots to go along with Devin Booker as well. So that team is scary and a good, I know they're the 6th seed, but that's a really good 6th seed in the Western Conference, and they could give a team like Denver some fits in the first round of a playoff series. I'm really excited to see the Phoenix Suns this year, how Devin Booker does playing meaningful basketball games on the national televised scale. Could be a lot of fun to see Devin Booker's next step that he potentially takes, and Chris Paul's always a fun watch, the point guard that is Chris Paul. So coming in at number 6, I have Monty Williams, the Phoenix Suns, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, who I think will have a big year as well. Coming in right there, number 6, the Phoenix Suns. I think they'll have a very big year. Coming in at number 7, I have the Portland Trail Blazers. I think they finished strong at the end of last year. I think they'll continue that momentum going on to this year. They're pretty much running back their exact same roster. Adding a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. could be good for their versatility on defense. Carmelo coming off the bench is an interesting thing as well. Portland coming in at number 7. Not much to say beyond more than that. I still think they're a really good team, and if any 7th seed can make it to the Western Conference Finals, it would be the Dame Time Lillard Portland Trail Blazers. Again, CJ McCollum's still on that team, Yusuf Nurkic, still a lot of really, really good players on that Portland team. And again, the West is just tough, but I think they'll have a better year than they did last year. Coming in, let me know, at number 7 is the Portland Trail Blazers. Coming in as the 8th seed in the Western Conference, I actually have the Utah Jazz. So the Utah Jazz didn't do a ton to improve their team this year, and that's pretty much the only reason why I have them staying at number 8. I don't think their team necessarily got any worse, but I just think a lot of these teams, Phoenix, Golden State, and I even think Dallas, have all gotten better, either due to age from their young players or actually physical roster improvement. So coming in number 8, I have the Utah Jazz. I need to see a better year from Mike Conley, but they still have Donovan Mitchell at the end of the day, one of the best young players in the entire league. and he's too good to let his team miss the playoffs, so I have them coming in at number 8, the Utah Jazz, and number 9, I have the New Orleans Pelicans. So I think the Jazz and Pelicans will compete for that final playoff spot. I still think New Orleans is a year away. I don't love their roster construction. I don't understand, how Eric Bledsoe is going to fit into this offense. And while I do agree with them accepting that trade for Drew Holiday because it was just an offer you can't refuse, Eric Bledsoe is an interesting way to see how this team's going to fit. And I don't know how his play style will really work with Giannis and everything like that. But at the end of the day, New Orleans is a really talented, really good young team. I just think they're still a year away. And this Western Conference, man, is just so tough. I think New Orleans would 100% make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, but with the West, teams like Utah, Portland, Phoenix, and Golden State filling in 5 through 8, it's tough for me to make an argument that New Orleans is better than Utah or better than the established veteran team Portland or a Phoenix team that just added Chris Paul or Golden State that's getting Steph Curry back. It's tough for me to see how necessarily New Orleans is better than any of those teams. So just to recap, I have the Lakers number 1, Clippers number 2, Denver number 3, Dallas coming in at 4, Golden State 5, Phoenix 6, Portland 7, Utah 8, and the Pelicans just missing it at number 9. Those are my Western Conference predictions heading into next NBA season. Let me know what you think of both my Eastern and Western Conference predictions. Who would you have making it? Who would you have missing it? Let me know what you guys think. We're going to take one final short break here. On the other side of it, we're not going to get to my top 10 NFL teams. I thought we have time for it. We do not. I just want to give you my game preview, my game predictions for tonight's Thursday night matchup between the Patriots and Rams. A fantastic game. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast. And again, I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, I want to give you quickly, for the final segment of today's show, the game prediction that I have between the Patriots and Rams. Again, it's a fantastic game tonight. The Patriots really fighting for their season. Their only real avenue to the playoffs is winning out here, coming in at 6-6. And the Rams are obviously in the middle of a division battle between them and the Seahawks for the number 1 seed in the AFC West. So it's a fantastic game tonight between, we got Bill versus McVay and Goff versus this Belichick defense again. It's going to be a lot of fun to see. Currently, the LA Rams are 5.5-point favorites. I think they deserve to be so. They're currently the best team. And I believe this game, correct me if I'm wrong, is in Los Angeles. Don't quote me on that. It is in Los Angeles. And at the end of the day, I think the Rams are going to win. However, this is going to be a close game, way closer than people think. So if you're betting on this game, I would have you bet on New England to cover. I think the Rams only win by 3 tonight. I think this defense knows how to beat Jared Goff, and they will. Again, if this Patriot offense was more dynamic and better, I would give the Patriots to win outright. And again, I will not be surprised if the Patriots win outright. But at the end of the day, I think Goff gets it done, and I think they win by about 3 points. I think the Rams will be able to shut down this Patriot offense, and I think they're going to stack the box and overload on the run. Not that the Patriots offense won't move the ball, but I think it's going to be a really, really ugly game. Don't be surprised if I see a 12-9 game on only field goals and no touchdowns were scored. It feels like one of those games. I think Aaron Donald's going to have a monster game. In the run defense game. And again, Goff does not do well against this Patriot defense. He will struggle to move the ball in general. So at the end of the day, I do think the Rams will win, but I don't think they will cover. I like the Rams to win this game. 20-17 or 14-12, something like that. Not by a huge margin. At the end of the day, though, I think the Rams do get it done and take care of business, and I unfortunately think the Patriots season sort of ends tonight. A fun season, but it does end. But a quick note on the Patriots. If they do pull this off, win tonight and win out and make the playoffs and go 10-6, Bill Belichick deserves Coach of the Year, and it's not even close. That's just one quick sentence I wanted to say at the end there. That's going to do it for this episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, again brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe to the podcast. We'd appreciate if you did all three of those things. Again, I have been your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I will see you all in the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.